the book of Ephesians. We'll be starting in chapter 4 today, verse 17. I want to read a few verses, and we're going to watch a real quick video here just to get a grasp about how to do some of this stuff here. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 17. It says, this is Paul writing. It says, I tell you this, and I insist on it in the Lord, that you must no longer live as the Gentiles do, in the futility of their thinking. They are darkened in their understanding, and they are separated from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them due to the hardening of their hearts. Having lost all sensitivity, they have given themselves over to sensuality so as to indulge in every kind of impurity with a continual lust for more. And he goes on and says, you didn't learn about Jesus Christ this way, and we're going to take a look at today about how do we change the attitudes when it comes to dealing with sin. The video I want to show you here today is about how one youth group decided to answer, how do we help each other live better Christian lives? Here's the video.
Having trouble living right? Headed down the wrong path? Struggling to break old habits?
I can do this all night.
What you need is a good slap.
Who are you?
I'm your new extreme accountability partner. Is there anything you'd like to tell me?
Get out of my house?
What you been watching?
It's the History Channel.
There's no naked people on the History Channel.
At SLAP, extreme accountability isn't just a job, it's an obsession. That's why we designed our patented gentle correction slap gun.
How's that gentle? It's not a fist.
What are your intentions with Lindsay?
Sure, we've been known to go overboard on occasion.
I just met her. We're just eating ice cream with the rest of our small group.
But our philosophy is it's better to go overboard than underboard.
What was that for?
Gluttony.
Strict lockdown accountability partners for all your extreme accountability needs.
Don't like the way you're looking at her, Tom.
That's my sister.
Oh. Does she have a boyfriend? You got me. I deserve that one.
If you're having trouble changing your ways, you might just need a good slap. We love our clients too much to let them ruin their lives. And believe me when I say that our gentle correction hurts us more than it hurts our clients. Most of the time.
Just a fun little lighthearted video about how we can live better. You know, we really try to put the things that we're going to learn today into life. It is one of these things that we have to be able to really understand how it is that we go about doing this and just exactly the why that we do this. Here it is in Ephesians chapter 4, back in verse 17. Understand that this, if you're following along in the NIV, there's a little heading here. It's called Living as Children of Light. And I think it's important for us to grasp just how important this is. This is what Paul says. He said, this is how the Gentiles live, and I insist, Paul says, I insist that you don't live that way. We are called as Christians to a different kind of life. And here's where we're going to start today, very simply. When we become Christian, we start dealing with the baggage and the things that we have in our life. There's, first of all, the very simple choice that we have to do, and that is very simply choose to live differently. We have to decide. We have to decide to live differently. It is one of these things that it seems so simple, yet at the same point in time, we really are called, as believers in Jesus Christ, to live differently. We just need to very simply make that decision to live the way that Jesus Christ would want us to live. We read verses 18 and 19 here, just about how he talks about the Gentiles there. They're just living in a very worldly way, always trying to seek more. You know, there's something about us in our sinful nature that it always craves for something new, or always craves for a little bit more, or always craves for a different kind of experience. And one of the things that's very important for us to grasp as believers in Jesus Christ, when we decide to live differently, there are some things that we have to change. This first thing that we're going to take a look at here, we're going to see in verse 23 when we get there, is a very simple thing called a discipline of a new attitude. Nobody likes discipline. I don't like discipline. You know, it's just one of those hard things. But read along with, we're going to pick up here in verse 20 and end up here in verse 23. He says, "You, however, did not come to know Christ that way, through that old way of life. But surely you heard of him and you were taught in accordance with the truth that is in Jesus. You were taught, with regard to your former way of life, to put off your old self, which is being corrupted by its deceitful desires, and to be made new in the attitude of your minds." This first thing, once you decide to live differently, there is something that is the hardest thing to do, and that is change the way you think. There's a lot of, just about anything else in the world is easier than to change how you think. It is the hardest part of being human. And this whole idea of discipline is to not let those thoughts, not let those old attitudes come in and retake or regain control over what God has already taken care of. There is this whole idea about having a new attitude. And the attitude is something like this. Jesus Christ died on a cross for me. He bought me forgiveness. He bought me grace. He has shown me mercy. As Kenny was saying in the communion meditation, he did the great exchange for me. What then do I need to do differently? The first thing is an attitude. An attitude that understands because of the cross, we have been set free from that stuff that so easily entangles. When I was in preaching class in Ozark Christian College, we had one of the students that I was with was taught. He was preaching about how to get rid of the sin that so easily entangles. And this story that he told has stuck with me, and just because it's just so amazing to imagine. So you're going to imagine this with me, okay? This is how he imagined getting rid of sin. When he was in 5th grade, he had gotten in trouble in class, and way back when, one of the things that they would do is that they'd have the kids stay late after school. And so what they did is that they had him and about 3 other kids to stay late after school, and what they were assigned to do for the 30 minutes that they were there was to mop the hallway. Now, I'm not sure if you've ever let 5th graders, especially 4 boys, decide to mop a hallway without adult supervision, but that's what happened in this punishment. Okay? So they start down at the one end by the doors, and they got the mop, and they got the water going, and it's just kind of wiggling around there. One of them discovers if you step on the soapy water in the tiled hallway of the school, you can slide. So it wasn't very long that they had, mopped about a 3 or 4 foot space here, and they were going, whee, and they were sliding through the water. And one of them says, "You know what, man, these shoes are just really cramping our style." So they walk down to the other end of the hallway, and they kick off their shoes, and they come back down, and now they're just in their socks, and they're getting some really good slide now in their socks. So they add a little bit more soap, and get a little bit more water going there on the floor, and one of the guys said, "Hey, you know what? I can do this. Watch this, guys." And he takes off his socks, throws them down there by the shoes, and he just goes slide. Well, that worked for about 3 or 4 times until one of the guys discovered that apparently when you're sliding on your legs, that jeans are a hindrance. So, yeah, that's what they did. They started soaping down the entire hallway. And these guys were pretty much just down to their skivvies, and they are just... He said, that's sometimes how we have to understand sin. It just so easily entangles us and prevents us from having fun. It's like, okay, so I can imagine what, still that whole story, just knowing 5th graders in my life. It's like, man, why didn't I think of that? That would be so much fun. But this whole thing about sin is that this new attitude says, you know what, you got to get rid of the stuff that's holding you back from being like Jesus. Now, we could sit here and take an inventory, and we would all know that one thing or several things inside of us that hold us back from being like Jesus. And the first thing to do to change it, not just to decide to live differently, but is to change your attitude towards it. And to just very simply let God fill in where you can. In verse 24, there's this deliberate decision, this deliberate attitude. Now that you've had the chance to decide to live differently, you're working on your attitude, there's something deliberate that happens. Read this with me in verse 24. Verse 24 says, verse 23 says, to be made new in the attitude of your minds, and to put on the new self, created to be like God in true righteousness and holiness. Now, we've heard this whole concept before. Yes, we understand that the old man has died, and we got to let that die and be buried. We got to put on a new self. But I want you to follow along with me a little bit more than this. Here in verse 24, it's more than about being put on a new self. It's understanding what has happening to you through the grace of God. What is happening through you through the promise of Jesus Christ. Here it is. You are created to be like God in true righteousness and holiness. Put on a new self because we are created to be like God. Righteousness and holiness. I'm not sure if you've ever thought about this whole concept about putting on a new self means that you're somehow changed in a great dramatic way, because you are. Do you remember back in the book of Genesis, what was the original lie to Adam and Eve? If you eat of this tree, you will be what? Like God. Now here's the interesting thing. It wasn't about the fruit there that makes us like God. It is this whole idea of putting on a new self, because we are created here to be like God in true righteousness and holiness. Now you're saying, well, preacher, how do I get righteousness and holiness? Here it is. There's nothing in and of yourself that you can do to get righteousness and holiness. Here's the secret. Here's what God says. It's because Jesus Christ was righteous and Jesus Christ is holy. Because he died on a cross and he rose again. Because of your faith, that righteousness, that holiness is now imparted onto you. And righteousness and holiness and putting on a new self has to do with faith. Has to do with belief. Has to do with understanding that something has changed and it's not me who did it. It is God who did it completely at the cross. And if you are here today, a believer in Jesus Christ, understand this. Your faith has made you, has created you like God in righteousness and holiness. The call then is to live to the way that you are called. To do that, there's some things that we have to not do and some things that we have to do. Read on with me here if you would. Pick up in verse 25. He says, therefore each of you must put off falsehood and speak truthfully to his neighbor. For we are all members of one body. In your anger, do not sin. Do not let the sun go down while you are still angry, and do not give the devil a foothold. He who has been stealing must steal no longer, but must work, doing something useful with his own hands, so that he may have something to share with those in need. Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. This whole list of stuff, right there, black and white, plain as day, we can read it and understand it. Here it is. It's departing from the old ways of who we are. And changing and doing something different because of our attitude, because of our choices, because of something that has happened within us because of God. We can then do something, and that is put off the old ways. If you're a complainer, quit complaining. If you're a liar, quit lying. If you have fits of temper and fits of anger, stop it. You want to talk about something? Talk about something that builds people up instead of tearing people down. Put away the old ways. Depart from those old ways. Verse 29. Read with me the rest of this passage here. It says, do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, so that it may benefit those who listen. Do not grieve the Holy Spirit of God, with whom you were sealed for the day of redemption. Get rid of all bitterness, rage, anger, brawling, slander, along with every form of malice. Here's what you do, verse 32. Be kind. Be compassionate to one another. Forgive each other, because just as in Christ God forgave you. So what is it that it really is about this whole change thing in life? How is it that God really wants us to live? Most of the time we as believers have focused on this whole list of don't do, don't do, don't do, don't do, don't do. And like our little video showed, we all deserve probably sometime or another a good slap. But if you would focus here in this passage and spend some time with it this week, seeing what God calls you to do, the change will happen. Be kind. How do you talk with each other? How do you talk with those around you? How do you handle your conversation, whether it's at work or at home? Be kind. Be compassionate. What do you do for the others around you? When you see somebody hurting, how do you do something to be like Jesus? You be compassionate. This last one. Forgive each other. You may be here today with something against someone else. Or you may be here today knowing that someone has something against you. Forgiveness starts with you. Forgiveness starts maybe by very simply picking up the phone or deciding to do something different and go to that person and say, I really need to forgive you, or I know that you have something against me and we need to get this relationship reconciled. The measure of a Christian is measured in this: how well you forgive others. I know this much today. We learn from Ephesians, as we learn from the book of Galatians, that God had said in his heart before he even began to create that he was going to make Jesus Christ the focal point of what he did. Jesus Christ and the cross is the focal point of where God says, I'm going to reconcile you to me. And God says, I'm going to take it for you. God demonstrated his love in this way, that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. He died for us to show us the extent of God's forgiveness. There is nothing like a lack of forgiveness that will hurt a relationship more than anything else. It may mean that you have to do something today before the sun goes down to pursue honest forgiveness. If forgiveness is at the heart of reconciliation, forgiveness is at the heart of the Christian experience. So here's what I want you to walk away with today. Decide to live differently. We know how the world is, and we can decide to live differently. We don't have to be like that. put on a new self, put on a new attitude. Let those old ways go their own ways. And be different. That being different is expressed in these very three simple ideas. Be kind. Be compassionate. Forgive. Because those are the qualities that God